like to call the Board of Administration meeting to order, and the first order of business is roll call, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Henry Jones.
Here.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
Margaret Brown. Good morning. Rob Fechner. Matthew Saha for Treasurer Ma. Lisa Middleton. David Miller.
Here.
Stacy Oliveras. Irena Ortega. Jason Perez. Mona Pascual-Rogers. Ramon Rubalcaba.
Here.
And Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda, can I get a motion to approve the time agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Taylor, second by Mr. Miller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, the item passes. Well, good morning again. And last week, our nation celebrated a very sacred and special day, Veterans Day. Veterans Day is more than just a national holiday. It's time that Americans can honor all those who served or are currently serving in our armed forces and those currently serving in reserve. This morning, we continue the celebration and honor of the veterans who are part of our CalPERS family and extended family of members, employers, and stakeholders. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Manuel Gomez, or as he's better known around here, Chef Manny. Manny served in the U.S. Marine Corps for 6 years from 1979 to 1985. He's also the executive chef of our cafe that feeds our team members and draws visitors from around Sacramento. Manny is going to lead us in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Manny.
Whoopsie.
That's a reminder.
Everybody checks their phones
Check
now.
your phones from last night, right? Okay, thank you, Manny. And I'd now like to acknowledge all the veterans in the audience here today and ask them to please stand and be recognized. Currently, past. We are grateful to each and every one of you for your dedication, your courage, and sacrifice. And on behalf of the board and all of us here at CalPERS, thank you for your service to our country. On a personal note, I want to also thank Rob Fechner for his participation in our Veterans Day activities. Rob is responsible for our tradition of celebrating this special day at our board meetings and providing special recognition to our veterans. 2 weeks ago, he and his grandson, Charlie, passed out American flags to our CalPERS veterans in the hallway outside the cafe. And now please join me in welcoming this to the stage, the CalPERS Patriot Chorus to perform a special song in honor of our veterans. Board members, will we move to these two sides of the dais so that they can come up?
For purple mountain majesties,
stream that sees beyond the years.
Who more than self their country love,
And mercy more than life. America, America, God's grace is shed on thee. So crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Thank our chorus for that rendition. What happened? Yeah, okay. We thank them for that rendition and helping us to honor our veterans. CalPERS prides itself in embracing and supporting diversity in our organization and in our work. So I'd like to acknowledge what today, November the 20th, observes. It is annual Transgender Day of Remembrance. November the 20th honors the memory of transgender people who lives where lives were lost in acts of anti-transgender violence. The week before this day marks Transgender Awareness Week to help raise visibility for transgender people and address the issues the community faces. I want to thank Mrs. Middleton for bringing this to my attention. It demonstrates how having a diverse board can raise attention to important, diverse topics. Ms. Middleton, did you want to make a comment? Number 6.
Okay. I would like to thank President Jones and my colleagues and the staff at CalPERS for recognizing today. Excuse me. Today marks the 20th anniversary of these memorials. So far this year, 21 lives have been lost. Nearly all of those murders were brutal and were intended to humiliate. So it is important that we take this recognition. I also want to acknowledge that today the governor of the state of California has taken recognition of the day and is flying a ceremonial flag in recognition of the loss of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. The board continues to make progress on its work streams to improve our governance, performance, and accountability. In case you missed it, the Board Governance Committee approved our calendar of meetings for next year. The committees will meet a minimum of 4 times a year, and the board will meet an additional 2 times, once for our July offsite and in January to elect president and vice president of the board. And also, as at the Health and Benefits Committee, I asked the chair of that committee and the Investment Committee chair to work with Mrs. Frost to determine whether or not additional meetings may be necessary and how they may be inserted into the plan. As I promised, we have also adding an annual stakeholder forum in January to facilitate greater dialogue between board members and our stakeholders. Our stakeholder relation team is beginning to plan this event, and I know that they have reached out to many of you for input on topics that you would like covered. We also got an update on the Insight platform that is being built for the board to house board materials and dashboards of vital signs to help in our oversight responsibilities. We expect an early version of the platform to be available next month, and it will be enhanced through 2019 and 2020. Thanksgiving wish. Let me close by wishing all of you a happy Thanksgiving. We wish you and your families and friends a very special day together. And with that, I'll turn it over to our CEO, Ms. Frost.
Thank you. And good morning, President Jones and members of the board. It's been over a month since we last met here in Sacramento, so I do have a number of updates for you this morning. Monday's investment committee, we had a discussion about the important roles that private equity and real assets play in helping us to achieve our long-term risk adjustment returns. It highlighted the need for the investment office to continue exploring all available opportunities in the private markets, including increasing our co-investment strategy. And again, that aligns with the long-term interests that we have here at CalPERS. As you heard from Greg Ruiz and your independent consultants, the team does have the necessary skills to engage with the potential general partners in this area. They also have the skills to underwrite those potential deals. It will take some time, and again, I think you heard this from the independent consultants as well as from our team. It'll take some time to do the pacing to get to the $10 billion that's necessary in order for us to hit our 8% policy target. It is possible with the level of fundraising that is available, and we will continue to work on the relationships with our general partners. And I think we've heard loud and clear that minimizing the GP relationships to 30, that felt like a little bit of an artificial target, and it's more the quality of those relationships, and we'll continue to pursue more of those. You also received a sustainability update on the deliverables in the 5-year strategic plan, which included some notable achievements in the areas of climate change and diversity and inclusion. Of the 500 companies we engaged with regarding board diversity, all of those have at least one female director and on their boards, and 53% have at least one diverse director. For those engagements that we felt did not result in positive outcomes, we used the proxy voting process to convey our priorities in the cases of 255 directors at 97 companies. And as an owner of those companies, we will continue to use our proxy in the best interest of CalPERS. We're also making progress on climate issues by integrating a climate framework into our own portfolio and working with like-minded partners around the globe for meaningful change. One of the ways that we've done that recently is by joining a group of institutional investors at the United Nations. And our advocacy efforts all are working. The Climate Action 100 Plus initiative, which is an initiative that we co-founded, now has over 370 signatories and represents now more than $35 trillion in assets under management. We've also had some notable success in climate risk reporting with some of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters in the United States. And climate risk, when we talk about the risks to the system, climate risk is one of the top 3 risks that we've identified, and we know that it's important to the long-term portfolio. Whether I'm talking with members of the system about the safety of their benefits, or I'm talking with employers about the rising contribution rates, there is a direct correlation between climate and financial impacts to the portfolio. On Tuesday, at the Finance and Administration Committee, we reviewed the annual financial statements, which really are the foundation of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, also known as the CAFR, and the CAFR will be accessible on our website in December. And this report really provides the transparency about CalPERS' financial position, as well as disclosing all of the expenses of the fund, including the investment expenses. Turning now to some outreach and engagement. Back in October, I did participate on a panel about healthcare technology for top 1,000 funds. That is Amanda White. If you've read some of her pieces, she covers public pensions around the world. I think it was a really interesting discussion about the future of medicine and the role health technology investments will play in advancing care. For my part in the panel, I was able to offer perspectives about CalPERS because we are an investor, we're a healthcare purchaser, and we also administer a public employee pension plan. On Saturday, I'll be headed to Southern California to talk with the Peace Officers Research Association of California, also known as PORAC. I want to thank Board Member Perez for this opportunity to meet with some of our first responders and tell them really what we're doing to secure their pensions. Rounding out the year are a few more events with very different groups. First, I'll speak on a panel for the California School Boards Association at their annual education conference and trade show. That will be followed by a visit with the SEIU board, which came at the invitation of their president, Yvonne Walker. And then finally, I'll talk with members of the League of California Cities at their Municipal Finance Institute meeting. Turning now to our annual fall activities that are really done within CalPERS and that state employees participate in on behalf of community nonprofit organizations. In early October, we kicked off the annual Our Promise campaign with a fundraising auction. Desserts are always popular here at CalPERS, and exhibits by a number of Our Promise nonprofits. A couple of weeks ago, we brought the chili cook-off back because that was really important to our team, and that was done during the lunchtime break, and more than 20 teams throughout the enterprise participated, with all proceeds going to Our Promise. I'd like to take a moment to thank Don Martinez and Forrest Grimes for leading this year's efforts as co-chairs of the campaign. They had a big team of volunteers working with them to host the events, and I know our employees look forward to these each year. It's part really of what makes working at CalPERS so special. As we near the holidays, we're also participating in the State Employees Food Drive that will last into January next year. Employees will be able to make food and monetary donations during the fundraising period, which will go to support the regional food banks and also provide support services to help individuals and their families who are really experiencing difficult times around the holidays. Last year, we collected close to 45,000 pounds of food, and this year the goal is 50,000 pounds. In other internal activities, we did hold our first active shooter drill on campus earlier this month. And like other drills we hold, this is important because employee and member safety on the campus is really, our highest priority. So not just the campus here in Sacramento, but also in our regional offices around the state. We had great partners in the California Highway Patrol, the Sacramento Police and Fire Departments, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. I'd like to thank them for taking a very active role in helping us to be knowledgeable as well as to be prepared. And now, before I close my report with the investment performance, I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about the 20th Annual Education Forum that we held in Oakland at the end of October. And I'm glad that several of you were able to join us. We had another strong year of attendance at nearly 830 people, despite the fact that some employers were not able to make it due to wildfires as well as the threat of power outages in surrounding communities. Over the last 5 years, we've hosted almost 4,000 attendees at this forum, which continues to grow each year. Through educational sessions, one-on-one consultations, and a packed exhibit hall, there were countless opportunities for attendees to connect with experts, with our team, get answers to their questions, and learn from their peers. Excuse me. Everywhere I went, and I had a number of conversations with people, and I hope you did as well, I was told consistently how exceptional this particular event was. And the improvement that they felt that they had really seen was the way that the content was delivered by the team in those breakout sessions, and that it was really an improvement in quality from years prior. And for many of them, they felt like this was the best one that they had attended. And then for the second year in a row, we hosted a special session just for local elected officials. And board members Lisa Middleton, Stacey Olivares, and President Jones were part of the discussion. And we're really there to help elected officials receive direct communication from us, as well as giving them some data that they could use and take back to their city councils or to their city administrators on what's happening at CalPERS. And much of that session, I didn't know whether we were going to get beyond this slide, but most of that session was really around the 20-year look back of, 20 years ago, the system was in an over 100% funded status. So what had happened between, that 20-year time frame to today, where we're roughly 70% funded. So much of the discussion and the dialogue was really about looking at each one of those events to make sure that those events do not happen again. We also did spend some time with them looking at the 10-year look ahead, because that's very important that we look at the things that we can control. You can't control what has already happened, but you can certainly learn from it. One of the highlights of the forum each year is the Spotlight on Excellence award ceremony, which honors outstanding public service. This is a peer-nominated award. It is evaluated by a CalPERS team, but it gives employees a chance to nominate a colleague, an agency, or a program for recognition. And this year's award went to Michelle Tucker with Caltrans. And Michelle is the division chief of their human resources department. And she's obviously earned a lot of admiration and respect from her peers. And I'd actually like to have the video team, which this is a video that was produced completely internally, have them roll the video so that those of you who are not able to attend, as well as others in the audience, can see her award. If you could roll the video, please.
Caltrans, what we're most known for is our maintenance of the state highway system, which is over 50,000 lane miles of highway. We're here to serve the public and to make sure that we keep the infrastructure going for California.
We touch every corner of this state in terms of all the bridges, culverts, tunnels and tubes.
So in human resources, our job is to really make sure that there is a workforce that's available to do all of the transportation projects. It's an area where when everything's going well, not a lot of people think about it. I want to acknowledge them and say, thank you, HR team. Thank you for everything that you do to hire and recruit and retain and take care of our workforce. You're making a difference in California.
I think it was easy to have Michelle as the nomination for the Spotlight on Excellence because she exemplifies leadership skills, enabling the heart and encouraging people to do their best on some of the more complex HR issues that we face with such a diverse department.
There's 5 leadership practices that we all follow, and my favorite has always been encourage the heart. That's your humanity. I think you need to inspire people. You need to model the way. Fundamentally, people need to know you care.
So in response to Senate Bill 1, we hired nearly 2,000 people within about a 6-month span of time, which necessitated us going all over the country to try to find really qualified people. It's not just like she's saying, okay, I empower you, go do this, but do it my way. She really gives you that faith that you're going to be able to succeed, and she's going to be there to support you.
Everybody was surprised at how successful we were able to be with these hiring efforts. And Michelle's staff worked really hard under her leadership to make it happen. But we surprised everybody. That's always fun.
So exciting to talk about the Prison to Work program. Michelle really spearheaded the program and coordinated the efforts with CalHR and GovOps so that we could find a way to help individuals transition from prison to work. Through her coaching and encouragement, we were able to go into the prisons and for a select group of eligible individuals that were identified, go through the hiring process, all the way through the interview process, and it really was a heartwarming, encouraging, motivating thing to be a part of.
Our work with the unsheltered is another way that we are matching up our need to hire a strong workforce with people who may not have had access to all the opportunities in the past. So there are several groups that we've worked with to try to find a path to employment for people who are unsheltered. Caltrans and the Bay Area office in particular has actually promised 20 jobs to successful graduates of that program. To be able to hire people who have skills and who just kind of need a foot in the door is really gratifying.
Not only does she have the vision to kind of see how far a program like this can go in terms of addressing the needs of the community, but it's that vision that essentially is trickled down to the rest of us so that we embrace that vision as well.
I think the nice thing about being a leader is you have more opportunity to make changes that you want to see in the world, right? Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in the world. And I think when you're a leader, it's easier to be that change because you have an impact on more people's lives.
I can genuinely say that I think that she is someone who believes in people and her teams and supports them to the fullest.
Michelle exemplifies true leadership with heart, with determination and really with a can-do attitude, and she really does model the way.
If people like Michelle are the future of civil service, we can all relax because we know this state's going to be great. It's going to be in good hands.
There's very few places I think where you can find as much meaning, and I feel so proud to be part of connecting people to their jobs and community. So to me, a public servant is someone who wants to make a difference.
CalTrans, you're awesome. Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah. Michelle is very passionate and humble about the work that she does at Caltrans and is a great example for this award. We'll have the chance to feature another public servant agency or program at next year's annual education forum, and it will be held a little bit earlier next year. It'll be held in September on the 30th, starts September 30th, and we'll go through October 2nd, and that location will be in Anaheim. So I'll close now with a monthly performance update of the Public Employees Retirement Fund, and this is as of September 30th, 2019. The rolling one-year return of the fund is 5.9. The three-year return is 8.1. The five-year return is 6.4, and the 10-year return is 8.4. And in closing, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving, and that does conclude my remarks, President Jones, but I am happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Frost. No questions. We now will move to agenda item 6, approval of the September 18 Board of Administration meeting minutes. Do I have a motion? So moved. Moved by Mrs. Taylor, second by Mr. Miller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing excuse, those excuse me. So the item passes. Also, board members, note that in your packets, for Mr. Fechner. Mr. Fechner?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to, and I did vote to approve those, I just want to remind all board members to be extremely diligent on putting in your request to travel. We just approved 3 travel requests that have already taken place. So I'd like to make sure that we're more proactive in the future and put our request in earlier. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Fechner, for that reminder. However, these events occurred during the month that we didn't have a board meeting, so the president has the authority to authorize the travel and then have the board confirm. So they followed the process and sent it through the president. Okay. And for my case, the vice president had to approve. Okay, thank you very much. So that item passes. Information consent items. I've not been asked to remove anything from the information consent items, so we will go to committee reports, and the first one is Investment Committee. I call on the president, the chair, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee approved the following. The Investment Committee met on November 18, 2019. Committee approved the following. Agenda item 7A, the board investment consultant interview subcommittee's recommended scores and to award contracts to Wilshire Associates Incorporated for general pension consultant and Makita Investment Group for private equity, real estate, and infrastructure consultant. Agenda item 8A, staff's recommended revisions to the global fixed income and global equity investment policies. The committee received reports on the following topics: an overview of the roles, performance, and recent accomplishments of the real assets and private equity programs, a first reading of the proposed changes to the real assets and private equity program policies, modifications to the affiliate fund's fixed income long liability benchmark, an update on the 5-year strategic plan for sustainable investments, and the annual report on CalPERS investments in California. The chair directed staff to ensure the external managers are in compliance with the new sexual harassment training laws and to clarify the definition of customized investment accounts in the next reading of the private assets programs policies. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: the private equity investment policy and CalPERS sustainable investment strategy. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fechner. The next report is the Pension and Health Benefits Committee. For that, I call on the chair, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Pension and Health Committee, PHBC, met on November 19, 2019. The committee received reports on the following topics. The committee received an update on mental health access and treatment among CalPERS members and information on current strategies of outpatient pharmaceutical spending. The committee received public comment regarding the Dependent Eligibility Verification Program and the CalPERS Long-Term Care Program. The chair directed staff to report back to the committee on CalPERS membership that may have been impacted by the DMHC corrective state settlement with Kaiser. Request Kaiser to respond to the issues that were raised during the mental health public comment from Kaiser's clinician and the National Union of Healthcare Workers. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the December meeting. The committee will receive an update on the Value-Based Insurance Designs PERS Select Plan and additional presentations on mental health from Anthem Blue Cross, Blue Shield of California, and United Healthcare. The next meeting of the PHBC is scheduled for December 17, 2019 in Sacramento, California. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fechner. The next report is Finance and Administration Committee. For that, I call on the chair, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Administration Committee met on November 19th, 2019. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 4B, approve the November 2019 prospective report of solicitations, contracts, purchase orders, and letters of engagement.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the item passes.
Agenda item 4C, approve an additional one-year contract term extension for the external investment manager contracts without a defined duration.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item passes.
Agenda item 6A, approve the draft 2018-19 basic financial statements.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item passes.
Agenda item 6B, approve the fiscal year 2019-20 mid-year budget. It's the first reading in the amount of $1.898 billion.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item passes.
Agenda item 6C, approve the proposed amendment to the elected board member percentage of time to be spent on board-related duties based on board and committee selections effective July 1st, 2019.
On the motion of committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item passes. Note Mr. Miller is abstaining.
The committee received a report on the following topic: annual review of funding levels and risk report. The chair directed the staff to provide a breakdown of classic to PEPRA ratios for each type of plan. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: annual review of funding levels and risks report. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the February Finance Administration Committee meeting, its annual diversity report, and the long-term care evaluation report. The next meeting of the Finance Administration Committee is scheduled for February 2020 in Sacramento, California.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. The next item is Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee, and for that I call on the chair, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Before I proceed with the committee recommendations from yesterday's meeting, I have one item that the committee approved at the September meeting but was left off from the September summary and therefore was missed being ratified by the full board in September. It's agenda item 4B. I propose and move the board approve the following proposed revisions to the board's compensation policy for executive and investment management positions. Approve the proposed revisions to the board's compensation policy for executive management positions.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye. Yes. Ms. Brown.
Thank you. Does this go back to, does this include the general counsel's pay increase, or I don't know if this 4B includes general counsel. I don't think so, but I just want to be sure.
Yeah.
Good morning, members of the board. Doug Hoffner, CalPERS team member. So that, I'm just going to look at the matrix. That's also going to come up in the second item. The committee ratified that, and it's addressed in item 4B of the current, of yesterday's agenda item.
So it's...
They're both 4B is the confusing part.
Okay.
So
Thank
it's
you.
in the second item.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the item passes.
All right. The committee recommends and I move the board approve the following from yesterday. Agenda item 4B, revision to the board's compensation policy for executive and investment management positions. Approve the proposed revisions to the board's compensation policy for executive and investment management positions.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Note Ms. Brown a no. The item passes.
Agenda item 6A, request for proposal for the board's primary executive and investment compensation consultant, scope of the services, timeline, evaluation, and subcommittee process. Approve the scope, services, estimated timeline, and selection process for the request for proposal for the board's primary executive and investment compensation consultant.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item passes.
Agenda item 6B, market compensation data, recommendations for the chief executive officer position. Approve option B with an annual salary base range of $377,250 to $628,750, an annual incentive range of 0 to 40% with a target of 27%, and a long-term incentive target of 27%. Additionally, use the midpoint of the new salary range, $503,000, to set the annual base salary for the current CEO effective July 1, 2020.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Note Ms. Brown a no. Thank you. The item passes.
The chair directed staff to provide the total compensation data for the Canadian, U.S. public pension funds, as well as base salary and incentive for the UC Regents Office of the President and Chancellors. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the next Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee meeting. The committee will receive a semi-annual status report on the Chief Executive Officer's incentive plan and review the committee delegation. The next meeting of the Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee will be scheduled for a date to be determined in 2020 in Sacramento, California.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor. The next item is the Risk and Audit Committee, and for that I call on the chair, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. The Risk and Audit Committee met on November 19th, 2019. The committee recommends, and I move the board approve the following. Agenda item 6A, Independent Auditor's Report for the fiscal year 2018 through 2019. Approve the CalPERS Board of Administration's Independent Financial Statement Auditor's Draft Report and the accompanying required reports for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item passes.
Agenda item 6B, Review of Independent Auditor's Management Letter. Approve the CalPERS Board of Administration's Independent Financial Statement Auditor's Draft Management Letter for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019.
On the motion of the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item passes.
The committee received a report on the Integrated Assurance Overview, and the chair directed staff to provide information with respect to the materiality threshold used by the independent auditor, where CalPERS fell in the range for the 2018 to 2019 fiscal year, and bring back information regarding best practices as it relates to audit materiality. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the February Risk and Audit Committee meeting. Mid-year plan updates for enterprise compliance and enterprise risk management, and the third-party valuation and certification of the state and schools pension plans as of June 30th, 2018. The next meeting of the Risk and Audit Committee is scheduled for February 19th, 2020 in Sacramento, California. That concludes my report, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Mr. Miller. The next report is Board Governance Committee. For that, I call on the Vice Chair, Ms. Pascal Rogers.
President, the Board Governance Committee met on November 18th, 2019. The committee reviewed and discussed the proposed schedule of board and committee meetings for 2020 and asked the CEO to work with all committee chairs to review monthly agenda items ahead of time to determine whether there is a need for additional committee meetings. The committee also discussed Workstream 4's updated recommendation to revise selected sections of the existing board policies pertaining to board member behavior instead of adopting a new board code of conduct. Rather than to do that, the chair directed Workstream 4 to work with Ann Simpson and the legal office on a new short draft of a code of conduct that incorporates all feedback discussed at the meeting. The committee also received an update on the development and implementation of the board's insight tool. The next meeting of the Board Governance Committee is tentatively scheduled for March 17th, 2020 in Sacramento.
Thank you, Ms. Pascal Rogers. The next item on the agenda is the proposed decisions of administrative law judges. And we have Mr. Shiraj Shah, the board's independent counsel, on the phone. You there, Mr.
Yes,
Shah?
Mr. President, good morning.
Okay, and before we look at each of these proposals, we got an update on one of the respondents' arguments. So, Mr. Shiraj, you want to make any comments on that?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Very briefly, I want to note that the board did receive, like you said, a late submitted argument at agenda item 9A6. I have reviewed that argument carefully, but it does not change the recommendation. That's all I have this morning, Mr. President.
Mr. Shah, would you repeat it? A couple of members did not hear what you said.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I said I want to note that the board received a late submitted argument from the member at agenda item 9A6. I have reviewed the argument carefully, but it does not change the recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, for the proposed decision, I call on the Vice President, Ms. Taylor.
You have to, oh, there we go. I move to adopt the proposed decision at agenda items 9A1 and 2 and 4 through 29 with the minor modifications argued by staff and remand agenda item 9A3 for the taking of additional evidence as argued by staff.
It's been moved by Ms. Taylor, second by Mr. Miller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the item passes.
I move to deny the petitions for the reconsideration at agenda items 9B1 and 2.
Moved by Ms. Taylor, second by Mr. Miller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the item passes.
And that's
Is that it?
That's it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shah. We have completed that item on the agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Now we have the information agenda items. The first one is enterprise performance reporting. Ms. Hutchins.
Good morning, Mr. President and members of the board. Sabrina Hutchins, CalPERS team member. Today I'm joined with members of our executive team to present to you the first quarter review of our enterprise performance report. This report represents our third year reporting cycle of the 17 through 22 strategic plan. What we want to focus on with you this morning are based on those indicators that are currently off target. A little background before we jump in. The system that the framework that this system aligns to is based on our foundation, and that is our mission, our vision, and our values. And in the simplest terms, represents who we are and what we want to achieve. This includes our strategic plan goals, as well as our outcome measures, which outline our high-level operational expectations. Our enterprise performance management system involves the development, implementation, monitoring, and reporting of performance metrics that support our mission. The intent of this system is to reinforce CalPERS' desire to be transparent and accountable in support of our strategic goals and operational expectations. As this system incorporates a significant amount of data and information, you do have all the reports within your agenda item attachments. However, our discussion will focus on the strategic side of the house. So a high-level view of the status can be found within Attachment A, which is a view of our strategic plan alignment map. This will show you the connection between our goals, objectives, measures, and initiatives, focusing again on the strategic side of the house. This map reflects an overlay of status indicators of red, yellow, and green, indicating those items that are on target, off target, and at risk. Additional details for each of these indicators can be found within Attachment C and D. So our review and analysis of first quarter information identified that 8 of our measures did refresh with new data. Those that are on target are related to our projected funded status, the 1-year total expected fund volatility, the investment manager's policies and procedures for ESG factor integration, the external investment manager reduction strategy, and the 5-year net value added results from the cost effectiveness benchmarking survey. These are all in the green. We will speak to our off-target measures in just a moment, and all of our business plan initiatives are tracking in the green this quarter. So as members of our executive team speak to the off-target items, they will provide information regarding the root causes and any mitigations and strategies currently underway. Keep in mind this report is reflective of a September 30th status and represents those items that are relevant and in the forefront of our strategic priorities. So with that, we will hand this over to Michael to start us off within the reduced complexity goal.
Good morning, members. Michael Cohen with CalPERS. This one is similar to several other measures that we've talked about recently in terms of our operational costs. This one specifically looking at the last fiscal year, 2018-19. The goal was to reduce operational costs year over year, and as you can see from the chart, we're well off target. As we've talked about before, the bulk of our expenses are really in our personnel costs, and this was the budget adopted before the current finance team really came on board, and ideally over time we'll get this back in the right direction in terms of some of the efficiencies we've talked about recently. But at this point in time, I wouldn't expect us to get anywhere near those long-term targets based on the budgets that we've adopted. That doesn't mean that we're not doing everything within the organization's efforts to be efficient and reduce costs to the greatest extent possible. We'll continue on those efforts. And this next one is really sort of follows on the Finance and Admin Committee's conversation yesterday in terms of our funding level and risk report. Nothing here that you haven't seen before. It shows that the overall funded status of the system is improving. That being said, being under 70% is nowhere near where we want to be. We obviously want to get up into the 90% range, which is our targets, and that is going to take a number of years and is a slow progress, but we are moving in the right direction.
All right, so the Dan Bienvenu, CalPERS team member. The next one we want to talk about is the annualized 5-year excess return. And the 5-year excess return through the end of the fiscal year is a negative 23 basis points, or about 0.25%. This, of course, is a number that we're not happy with and we're focused on improving, but has been discussed at Investment Committee on Monday. These improvements will take time, both because by definition of it being a 5-year number, it takes 5 years to fully realize, to bring all the old information out. But secondly, because some of the improvements surround the private asset classes, and those are just slow-moving changes. The two main sources of the underperformance have to do with underperformance within the asset classes of real estate, public equity, and private equity, but then also an underallocation to the private asset classes, which outperformed the public market proxies. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of work going on focused on addressing this. Under Ben's leadership, we've taken on a full-blown strategy review that's reviewed all of the investment capabilities in the investment office, with a great deal of strategy rationalization that's happened, resulting in about $100 million of annualized cost savings, as well as an internalization of a great number of assets, and then most importantly, a reduction in the active risk in the portfolio. And then also some of the focus on the total fund, really migrating ourselves to a culture of focusing on one total fund and working as one team to really manage that fund. Finally, we've been focusing on getting the benchmarks to really accurately reflect what we're trying to achieve with the asset classes. So those are the areas of focus. As I say, they'll take time, but much like the funded status, but we're laser focused on seeing this happen. Thank you. Okay. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes. And that concludes our report. Our second quarter review is due in February, unless you have any other questions.
No questions. We look forward to your next report. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, state and federal legislation. Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Mr. President and board members. Danny Brown, CalPERS team member. My state legislative update will be brief, as the legislature has ended their session this year on October 13th, and they're now in interim recess. Your board material contains the final outcome of all of the bills that we have been tracking. I will just highlight the 4 that you took positions on. AB 1320, the divestment bill by Assemblymember Nazarian, that we opposed, was signed by the governor as expected. Just as a reminder, this bill would only go into effect if the federal government passes a law that sanctions the government of Turkey for not recognizing the Armenian genocide. So if you're following the news now, you'll know that there are a number of sanction bills going through Congress as the result of the military action in Syria, but none of them mention Armenian genocide, so none of them would trigger this bill as written. It's probably, I don't expect that there would be a sanction bill that would impact this legislation, but it's probably more likely that we might see another bill next year that's just generally focused on the government of Turkey. On the health side, there were 3 bills that you supported, and all 3 of them were signed by the governor. AB 731 and SB 343 deal with health plan data disclosure and transparency, and then AB 824 was the bill that limits so-called pay-for-delay agreements between large drug manufacturers and generic drug companies. And so the idea is to ensure that generic drugs come to market sooner. The legislative office is now working on ledge proposals for next year, and we will be bringing those to you over the next few months. On the federal side, obviously much attention on the impeachment inquiry in the House. So there's a lot of, House is spending a lot of time on that. The Senate is focused on passing 12 appropriation bills to keep the government open. In fact, Congress is working on another short-term continuing resolution today in order to keep the government up and running through December 20th. So as a result, it's not likely that much meaningful legislation is going to get done this year. However, the House and the Senate continue to work on drug prescription legislation. The House, as I mentioned before, is focusing on the Speaker's bill, H.R. 3, and the main component of her bill is to allow Medicare to directly negotiate with the drug manufacturers with the idea of bringing down drug costs. That bill has passed 3 committees, but it's on a partisan vote. They're hoping to take this bill up in December on the House floor, but it's not likely to go anywhere on the Senate. On the Senate side, the Senate Finance Committee continues to work on bipartisan legislation. The main components of their bill is to cap Medicare beneficiaries out of pocket for drug costs, and to also require drug companies to issue a rebate to Medicare if their costs go up above inflation. The Trump administration has also now weighed in on in kind of support of the Senate finance approach. But even if they can reach some kind of bipartisan agreement on the policy, the current politics may prevent that bill from even moving forward. On the regulatory front, as was discussed in the Investment Committee on Monday, the SEC recently proposed some new rules related to proxy voting advice and shareholder proposals. I think Samiso provided you a good summary of those changes, so I won't repeat them, but I do want to just ensure you that we will be working with our investment office and our federal representative on submitting comments to those proposed rules, as well as collaborating with our industry partners. And then finally, I just want to remind you that our federal contract with K&L Gates for federal representation does expire on January 31st, 2020. So we are in the RFP process now. We did receive 7 proposals. So we're currently reviewing those, and we'll be holding interviews next month. Our review panel consists of myself, Doug Hoffner, Brad Pacheco, and Ann Simpson. So we hopefully will be able to announce the new federal representative over the next few months and before the next one expires. And with that, I'll end my update and answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Brown?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Brown? Ms. Brown? Yes. I know Congress has been very busy with impeachment hearings, but I heard yesterday that AOC chaired a hearing yesterday on private equity, and I had a contact from a reporter that says CalPERS benchmark was mentioned. So I don't know who follows up on that or who kind of takes the lead on that stuff, but it's always interesting when we get mentioned by AOC. So.
Yes, I mean, we'll take a look at it. There was a hearing yesterday on private equity in the House and Financial Services Committee, chaired by Ms. Waters. In fact, I've watched some of it. I haven't watched all of it. We're still working on our summary of the hearing, but in fact, our CIO was actually quoted a couple times in the hearing too, and there was some questions about. There was an exchange between Ms. Cortez and one of the panel members, Ms. Applebaum, about CalPERS changing their private equity benchmark and lowering their benchmark. Yes.
I'd appreciate that follow-up. I know we don't always get you don't bury us with all that information, but I'd be interested in receiving that information and any response we provide back to the committee. And thank you for reminding me that Ms. AOC did not chair. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. Mr. Brown, thank you very much for your report. Now look to Mrs. Frost for summary of board direction.
The only one I recorded was the one that Ms. Brown just indicated, that if we do respond to this committee, which it's unlikely that we will do so, but if we do respond to the committee remarks, that we provide a copy of those comments to the board.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the last item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone other than the two that I have on the request sheet wishes to address the board? If so, please go over and sign up. And if not, we will assume that these are the only two. So with that, I call on Mr. Stajan and Mr. Rice. And you will have 3 minutes each, and if you would introduce yourself and which organization you're associated with.
Is this where we go?
Yeah. I'm sorry, yeah. Mr. State.
Good morning, President Jones, honorable board and staff. My name is Brian Rice, and I'm the president of the California Professional Firefighters. We proudly represent more than 30,000 courageous men and women on the front lines protecting our state. I'm here to express our profound disappointment and anger about the recent CalPERS staff decision, a decision that we believe is a first step on a road that could one day end secure pensions and hurt CalPERS as a system. As you know, the City of Placentia has chosen to establish a semi-professional fire agency within its borders. The department will be staffed in part by reserve firefighters supported by a controversial local ambulance company. Placentia's decision poses a profound danger and threat to the safety of its citizens and the safety of future firefighters. It's a tragedy waiting to happen, and ultimately the City of Placentia's leaders will have to face the music for their destructive act. What brings us here is a demand by Placentia to take away secure retirement from their future fire employees. Last week, the city's demand was effectively rubber stamped by CalPERS staff. This action happened without a chance for input from the elected board. We think it runs counter to any commitment to public accountability, and more importantly, it's an attack on the very notion of a secure retirement for public service. On its face, the Placentia decision is absolutely discriminatory. Only firefighters, like the ones with me, will be denied retirement security under CalPERS. City of Placentia is a contracted city with CalPERS. The city administrator, the police chief, indeed every police officer and clerk employed by Placentia will get a secured CalPERS retirement. What we don't know is if the firefighters will get any kind of retirement benefit at all. We think depriving an entire class of workers from a pension is not consistent and with CalPERS' stated commitment to a secure retirement for public workers. By even allowing the city to discriminate in retirement, any guaranteed death benefit for the widows and orphans of fallen firefighters will be ripped away. They won't have anything. The police officer in Placentia is killed in the line of duty, he will be benefited as such. As it stands now, if a firefighter is killed in the line of duty in Placentia, we hope that his widow will receive whatever his 401k was. Placentia's model offers no guarantee. Firefighters are supposed to take their word that their widows and children will get something if they die. I was at a council meeting where this travesty was passed, and I'll say it publicly and for the record, and I've been to municipal meetings for over 30 years, Board of Supervisors, city councils. It was the most corrupt meeting I have ever attended. In my view, their word doesn't count for anything. What's most troubling about this decision is what it says about the future of a secured retirement and the sacred mission of CalPERS. And make no mistake, this is a first step down the road to ending secure pensions. If local agencies are allowed to pick and choose who gets a pension and who doesn't, it isn't hard to figure out that someday somebody's going to say nobody gets a pension. Your staff has green-lighted a path that could affect the retirement security of every public sector worker, and I believe even the security of the fund and CalPERS itself, of which I'm a proud member. California firefighters by the thousands are putting their lives on the line every day. I'd say people like Dan Robertson from Oakland Fire, he couldn't be here today because he got forced back to duty because California is under a red flag condition, so he's out protecting his community. People like Captain Brandon Bailey sitting right next to me, who I spent time on the fire line with at the campfire as they had spent days battling the fire and then days after sifting through the rubble, not for bodies, but for fragments of bodies. The city of Placentia has shown what it thinks of these men that are sitting with me and their brothers and sisters on the line in California. They gave us the back of their hand. Placentia failed its employees, and more importantly, it will fail the citizens that they are duty-bound to protect. You have a responsibility. CalPERS provides more security than you as a board realize. CalPERS, as a union firefighter, as a firefighter, I don't know that the board understands the underlying stability that we as municipal workers receive when we're members of CalPERS. Whether it's in the health insurance arena or it's in the workers' comp arena, we have always been able to count on CalPERS. And I'm going to tell you today, sadly, that with the decision by staff, it really rocks that belief for me. I'll close up because President Jones, I know you're giving me a little leeway, and I appreciate that. We will not back down from the fight with Placentia. I know the law is the law, but I believe the statute gives CalPERS the ability to share their opinion, the board, on this. The decision that stands is not the right decision. We as a group are solution-oriented, and we will always seek that. But I believe staff has missed the mark on this one. When we allow agencies to discriminate against entire classes of workers, we've missed the mark, and it didn't even get to you to weigh in on. That makes me angry, and it discourages me, and it concerns me for the men and women that may be employed by the city of Placentia. It's flat discrimination, and it's wrong. And I urge the board to continue to look at this and to be willing to work with all public employees, and certainly public employees that are safety members, in finding a solution to this. Either you're a member of CalPERS or you're not. And to be able to cut 1/3 of your employees out that are sworn to protect life and property in the state of California and the community of Placentia, to me, it's criminal. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you, both of you, one of you may not have signed up to speak, so you signed up? Okay, you go ahead then.
Is this on?
Not yet.
Oh. Good morning, President Jones and the rest of the CalPERS board. My name's Tim Steggy, and I work for the Orange County Fire Authority as a captain at Station 61 in Buena Park. I'm also the president of Orange County Professional Firefighters.
Would you talk a little bit more directly into the mic? Thank you.
Orange County Professional Firefighters, Local 3631, where I represent over 1,000 men and women who operate as firefighters, paramedics, engineers, and captains, and most of which are reciprocal employees with your agency. For nearly 25 years, our firefighters have the privilege of protecting the city of Placentia at fire stations 34 and 35. But the Placentia City Council has chosen to dramatically downsize its operation for fire protection. The department they plan to create will cut active firefighters in half and backfill with reserves. Apparently, they also have a plan to deprive their firefighters of a secure pension. By their own admission, the ability of this new Placentia Fire Department to provide even basic fire response will depend on help from outside agencies like Fullerton, Anaheim, and Orange County Fire Authority. But it also means that their fire department personnel, the people who answer the call every day, will be categorized as permanent second-class firefighters. Without a secure retirement, they will have nothing to offer but understaffing, overwork, and no guarantee for the future. By definition, the Placentia Fire Department will be the least experienced, least qualified, and least capable of any urban fire department in California. If Placentia is allowed to deny a retirement to their firefighters, that inferior service will be permanent. The impact will be felt not only by the citizens of Placentia, but also the surrounding communities. The surrounding agencies will be asked to divert their own resources to protect the measurably inferior department. When Fullerton, Anaheim, and Orange County firefighters need help from Placentia, they will not be receiving a like-for-like service. There will be lesser skilled employees that will be potentially requested of their service. They're getting understaffed, underexperienced crews. As a firefighter, secure retirement isn't an added perk. It's an essential protection we earn for a career of putting ourselves in harm's way. The city of Placentia has made it clear that they don't care about that. But as a CalPERS board, we think that you should care to stop a very bad situation from becoming even worse. Please do whatever you can to keep Placentia from taking the path that is unfair to its firefighters and unsafe to its citizens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have it? Okay. Well, thank you for your comments. And Mr. Rice, as you indicated, CalPERS' mission is secure retirement for all public employees, and we will always support that thesis going forward, so that as we look at what happened, and you make some recommendations of how you plan to go forward, we will, as we always do with any agency or in possibility of legislation, we will review it from that perspective, that we want to make sure that all public employees has a secure retirement system. So we will certainly be able to do that on your behalf.
We look forward to working with the board on this.
Okay. Mr. Fackner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first of all, thank you all for being here today and for your testimony. Mr. Rice, I share your angst and your anger. I just channel it in a different direction. I channel it towards the staff at Placentia. I think what they're doing is appalling, to strip people of their retirement benefits, to offer them nothing more than a DC plan, which we all know what happens in most DC plans. But even more importantly, it's unconscionable that they would expect folks to come to work and not have a death benefit when they put their lives on the line every day they leave that firehouse. I think the members of that council and the mayor of Placentia should really rethink their decisions. I think, again, I'll repeat, it's unconscionable to put somebody's life in line and not have any benefits for their family because the job they're doing puts their life in line every day to support us. I hope that the state legislature and the governor's office is listening to this conversation and that they pay heed so that we can put some things in place to prevent this from ever happening again. So again, thank you for being here, and you have my support going forward. If you need meetings with the legislature, et cetera, I'd be happy to assist. Thank you.
Ms. Middleton.
I think that's me.
Oh, 8. Oh, Ms. Taylor. Sorry.
I want to thank you, Mr. Rice and Captain, for coming, and I will echo my colleagues' angst. I'm very angry at the city of Placentia. I agree that this is just another way to get rid of a defined benefit pension plan. And starting with the firefighters, I can't even imagine them keeping firefighters if once they're trained up, they'll leave to be in a city that has a defined benefit pension plan. We've seen this over and over again as in San Jose and other cities that have tried to get rid of the defined benefit pension plans of their safety workers, and then they lose 2/3 of their workers. So I, too, will be willing to work with you. Anything you need, let us know. But I am, again, I'm directing my anger at the city of Placentia because I think that this is a morally problematic decision that they have made. And I also feel like it's just a step in the direction of getting rid of the defined benefit plan for the entire city of Placentia. So again, anything that you guys need at the legislature or with our staff and backing you up, let us know. And I appreciate your work and everything that you guys do for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perez.
I got a ton of jokes about fire as a cop, but I will say I could not do your job. I've had to go into a burning mobile home once, and it really stunk, and I don't want to have to do that again. Mr. Jones already spoke about what the board will do, and I will choose to show some grace towards the Placentia City Council, although I'm angry also. More than being angry, my heart hurts for the potential employees of that fire service and for the community of Placentia. I've always looked at Placentia as a strong city. Being in Corona, we're neighbors, not little neighbors, but very close. And wow, I'm glad I'm not going to live there because reading through some documents already, they're going to have a reduced crew. They're going to have a significant volunteer force that is just not the same. I applaud people being volunteers and being reserves, but it's just not the same as being active and trained and in it day to day. We received a letter via email last night from a member of the Placentia City Council, and at the bottom of that letter, it showed that this member was a recipient of the 2019 Do the Right Thing Award. And I implore council to go back and look in the mirror and really think that if it's fair for a firefighter to go on the line, the death benefit's a big deal, the defined benefit is a big deal. But we're not even talking about disability. The numbers are astronomical of how often firefighters get injured. And are they just going to be out of work? Are they going to... That's a very scary thing. In addition to Mr. Fechner's statement, whatever I can do to persuade council to do the right thing, like the award says, I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank all of my colleagues for their comments, which I support fully and completely. As a member of a city council, I have had the opportunity to watch firsthand the devotion of our firefighters and the work of our firefighters. I can tell you, and I also know, the extent to which the mutual aid pacts that exist between municipalities, particularly suburban municipalities, is incredibly important, and the ability of firefighters in one city to be able to rely on the professionalism of the firefighters in the other city is absolutely critical as we respond to emergencies. I can say as a member of a city council, the vote that was taken in Placentia is not a vote that I would take in Palm Springs.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, again, I would echo the comments that you've heard from my colleagues. It's an appalling decision by the council, in my view. I just express my support and appreciation for all public safety, but for firefighters, and nothing sounds more frightening to me than to be a firefighter, especially in the current environment, both the natural environment, the built environment, and the political environment. And so any support that I can provide as a board member, and just my appreciation for our courageous firefighters and their sacrifices, and the need to have secure employment, secure retirement for firefighters and their families, for all public employees and their families, but particularly this case just stands out as a truly deplorable decision, and I wish you the best going forward, and any support that I can provide, be happy to step up.
Thank you.
Mrs. Pascal Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. It's an honor to hear you. It's an honor to know you, and in my experience have worked with firefighters. It is, and I hope that people hear, it is a privilege and honor to be a public servant. It is a privilege and an honor to protect your community and work on behalf of your community. It is disgraceful when people, staff or elected members of a municipality like Placentia would forget the honor and the people that they serve. So I echo the comments of my colleagues. I stand with you 24/7. I hope that the appropriate people hear. This is an extremely bad decision, and they need to think about why they're in their jobs, because it might be time for people to leave if they don't remember who they are working for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rubalcaba.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too am alarmed by any reckless approach to deny defined benefit, a secure retirement pension to firefighters. And I join with the colleagues on this board in pledging to help. I also want to state that there were some comments about CalPERS staff role. I think sometimes we're boxed in by what precedent and certain laws, but please understand that our staff, taking leadership from the board and their own leadership, will be also in this fight. We want to preserve defined benefit, and thank you for speaking to us.
Okay, seeing no further requests to speak, again, thank you for being here, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that concludes the public comment. I have no requests from anyone else to speak. So this meeting, we will have closed session in 10 minutes. And so that's 10:30, right? Let's just say 10:30. Okay, so this meeting is adjourned.